So even though oil prices spiked at $123 a barrel, we did not see a real boom in drilling activity in Saskatchewan. Things picked up, but it was absolutely not a return to boom days. Why do you think it worked out that way?
There's no reinvestment because of lack of certainty due to federal policy. That is nothing more that needs to be said.
So, and I guess what's happening with that is that companies are really leery to throw $500 million or $1 billion into an area where the federal government says, well, we're going to cap everything you're doing.
They won't do it, and nor should they, when no one would. And so, words have, as I've said a number of times, you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of reality. Well, the reality is when you make a statement that you're going to cap emissions and productions in the energy industry, people are not going to invest in that industry. Even though a few months earlier you made a statement that you're going to increase the oil production by 300,000 barrels. You've done nothing to indicate that there's going to be any increase in the oil production. In fact, the policies that you've come forward with, and we talked about this last time, are quite the contrary, and they say that the policies are actually pressuring the volume of oil being produced down, even though it's some of the most sustainable oil that you can find on Earth. And so that is the number one issue that the Saskatchewan oil industry has, the Saskatchewan energy industry has, likely the Canadian energy industry, is a lack of certainty with respect to federal policy. I'm hopeful that will change at the next election.
And we talked about that in September. The federal government said back in April or so, we're going to increase oil production by 300,000 barrels.
Yep.
You have seen no evidence of that, correct?
Quite the contrary. Quite the contrary. In fact, I think it's since then they've started to talk about capping emissions and production. And so, in addition to not putting forward any policy that would encourage 300,000 barrels to come on board and how to get rid of that 300,000, get it to market, they've come forward with policies that are directly the other direction in saying we're going to cap your emissions and we're going to likely cap your production. So it's policy that is wrong-headed and makes no sense with the words that they say, and that's why we're seeing the lack of investment. So by the time the next election comes around, either the policy needs to change or the government needs to change.
So this summer, the Chancellor of Germany came to Canada earnestly seeking liquefied natural gas. And he was told by the Prime Minister that there wasn't a business case. And he was taken to Newfoundland where they showed him where they're going to build some wind turbines on the shore.
Yeah.
And they're going to turn water into hydrogen.
Yeah.
And they're turning hydrogen into ammonia because
Yeah.
you can't ship hydrogen overseas.
Yeah.
There's only one ship on the planet that can ship hydrogen. And they're going to ship ammonia across the ocean. They're going to use that supposedly for fuel. And then the Chancellor then went to the Middle East and Qatar and possibly UAE and signed some contracts saying, yeah, we'll buy all your LNG. What do you have to say about that?
Oh, I talked with. I have a counterpart in the UAE that I talked to since we were there this past year, and it was about 10 days after Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany, was in Saskatchewan that they were able to ink a memorandum of understanding with the Emirates and potentially Qatar on providing some LNG into Germany for this winter, which is when they ultimately need it. They weren't in Canada asking us to consider building some windmills so that we could build a building on shore in Nova Scotia so that we could bring forward some technology that is maybe questionable at best today, but ultimately we'll get there into the future to turn water into hydrogen and then somehow ship it across the ocean as ammonia in some distant time. European Union has energy security issues today. They need their allied friends and neighbors to step in and help with this. We're doing that from Saskatchewan's perspective. You see Cameco now with their recent purchase of Westinghouse is actively looking at building various electricity reactors, nuclear reactors in that Eastern Europe area. There's a company that is doing the Canadian thing and stepping up and through commerce and providing that energy security for countries in an area where they previously haven't had it due to their policy decisions. The Prime Minister doesn't know if there's a business case that's positive or negative for LNG. And what I would say is if you strip away some of their policies, that business case would markedly improve in this nation, not only for the production, the sustainable investment into the future, but also the egress and getting LNG to one of our allied neighbors, which in this case is Germany, but I would say anyone in the European Union should deserve access to it.
You touched on SMRs, and SaskPower is going around doing these these presentations, and they did one Estevan 2 weeks ago, and I asked a number of questions at that. And I kind of said, look, you just made out the case that we don't have much hydro potential left. The federal government won't allow us to do coal. They're indicating we might not be able to do natural gas, or much more natural gas. So, the broad hint is we have to go nuclear. But then they say, well, the decision won't be made until 2029. I mean, if we have to live under those circumstances, why don't you as a government say now, look, we will go nuclear and that's it, and we'll figure it out in 2029 exactly what we're going to do, but make the decision now in 2023 and say, this is what we're going to do, we're going to find a way to make it happen, as opposed to putting off that decision for 6 years and having people in Coronach and Estevan and possibly Elbow wondering what's happening. Do I sell my house or do I lose another $100,000 on it?
Yeah, no, I was down in Coronach and met with the folks working at the power plant as well as the community leaders, and I was appreciative for the input that they had. We're working actively with the community on some opportunities that might arise there, as Coronach is Poplar River is one of the plants that was scheduled to be out of service by 2030, regardless, as it's finding its way to the end of life. Shand is the outlier, as it could run until 2042, obviously, and provide affordable power for Saskatchewan residents. I think you will see a decision, and not to contradict in any way the Saskatchewan Power Corporation, but I expect that you will see a decision on direction sooner than 2029. I think the people in particular in Estevan and Coronach deserve that decision sooner rather than later. One of the challenges, in fairness, not just to Sask Power but to the government proper, has been the murky, changing environment that we're working in. We've been making decisions in the last couple of years around natural gas, where that environment now has all of a sudden changed with the clean electricity standard, saying natural gas will be phased out by 2035, and so we're consistently working in this very where the ground is always moving in the environment in this space, and so it's difficult to lock something in, and then I think we just have to have an understanding that should there be a change in policy or change in government, there might actually be a change in some of our direction, because at the end of the day, what the goal is to have as affordable a power available for Saskatchewan people so that we can continue to attract investments and then just keep life as affordable as possible here. And so we're doing whatever we can to answer those questions in what is a very, very fluid environment.